Okay, if everybody is ready and settled, I'd get the event going. My name is Dominic Taylor, for people who don't know me, and I'm the director of the Limerick Writers Centre and the managing editor of Revival Press, our poetry imprint. I'm delighted that we've been invited by the Mountshannon Arts Festival and Roisin in particular to take part in this festival, this year's festival. Unfortunately, we're all being pushed into a little bit of isolation over the pandemic, and but I think we can still form a nice little poetry community among ourselves here and have a nice reading. We've got 4 readers for you tonight. They're all published by Revival Press. We have Anne Cousins, who's originally from Wexford, and she has a little secret Limerick connection as well. We like to publish people who have something to do with Limerick if at all possible. And we have Anne Cousins, we have Mike Durack, who just lives out the road in Tipperary and a great supporter of all the events here in Limerick City. We have Frances Browner, who's got a really close connections with the city as well through her parents. And finally, we have Kieran Beville, who has brings, I suppose, the old, since the Castle Poets back in the 1960s, Kieran has been involved in the poetry scene in Limerick. He's been out of town for a long time, but he's back for the past couple of years, and he's had about his 3 public new collections since that time. So we're looking forward to hearing all those. Before we begin, I'd just like to get Roisin Bugler from the festival, just to say a little bit about the festival in general. So I'll hand over to you, Roisin.
Thank you, Dominic, and welcome everybody. My name is Roisin Bugler. I'm a member of the Mountshannon Arts Festival Committee, voluntary organisation. For those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with Mountshannon Arts, I'll just give you a very quick introduction. In 1997, the first Festival of Arts took place in Mountshannon, County Clare, and it was initially known as the Inishcaltra Festival of Arts. It was established by a group of visual artists, and it sought to bring contemporary arts to audiences in our idyllic lakeshore setting. So the journey has brought us here to the present day, and this year we celebrate our 25th festival, 24 years, 25 festivals. As everybody knows, 2021 has been a very complicated year for the arts, and there's been limited opportunities for artists. And to that end, we've decided to organise 2 festivals: our traditional June Bank Holiday Weekend festival that has taken place online and in conjunction with our local radio station, Scarlet Bay Community Radio, and we hope to have a September festival with live events. I'd encourage everyone to support the arts and the artists in whatever way you can. And to our 4 readers tonight, and indeed all the Revival Press poets, buy the books, and if you have the books, buy the books for a friend. So if you can check our website, mounshannonarts.ie, you can see the events that have already taken place this June festival, and keep an eye out for what's coming up for our September festival and ongoing events throughout the year. And just to say, Mountshannon Arts is supported by the Arts Council of Ireland, Clare County Council, and from donations from local businesses and individuals. And I'm delighted to be here with Revival Press, and I'll hand back to Dominic, who will introduce the readers.
Thank you, Roisin. And can I echo that as well about supporting the poets and buying the books? It's really been a difficult time for publishers, because with no live launches, we're totally dependent on online sales, and they just don't make up for the live encounter with people. So if you can, you can buy the books. They're all available from our website, limerikwriterscentre.com. Okay, we'll go on to our first reader tonight, which is Anne Cousins, who hails from County Wexford. She's probably relatively only recently, 2012, since that she got involved in writing poetry. But since then, she's been published in a lot of magazines and journals. And she was commended in the Patrick Kavanagh Poetry Competition in 2015. And you can hear her quite often as well on RT Radio 1, Sunday Miscellany. Revival Press were delighted to publish her debut collection there a few months ago. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Anne, who will begin the reading.
No, thank you. Can you hear me? You there?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Dominic, and thank you, Roisin, for having me at Mountshannon. It's like kind of beam me up, Scotty. It's great to be able to get around the country kind of reasonably easy. So the first poem I'm going to read from Redress, my book is called Redress. And the first one I wrote in 2016 during the 1916 commemorations. And when it seemed like everybody was reviving and recovering their Republican roots and fighting for Ireland, except nobody in my family had ever done any fighting like that or anything, as far as I could see. So I kind of thought about it, and I wrote about my great-grandmothers and what they were doing in 1916. Foremothers, 1916. During that Irish spring, my foremothers were busy. No time to spare for rebellion. Maggie Keating survived the last of her 16 confinements, struggled to her knees, and gave thanks for a breathing child. 3 miles away at Hill Kilturk, Mary Ann Cousins smelled the bloom of consumption on her boy's breath and knew the worst was still to come. Lizzie Moore found the May bush adorned with ribbons and gold sovereigns, a proclamation of love from Doyle the baker. And poor Ellen French, under a mound in Amberstown, labour and care forever done, never heard the news that on a glorious Easter day, excuse me, the Ryan girls from Toncool concealed dispatches in their corsets and risked all for freedom, while Una Brennan, pale and faint with morning sickness, took the train to Enniscorthy to fly the new flag of Éire over the town. My foremothers were keeping house, keeping watch, keeping faith, hoping there would be something left for them when they looked up from their work. And another 1916 themed one was written in response to Pádraig Pearse's poem, The Mother, one that we all learned in school and which started with, I do not grudge them, Lord. And even as a child, I kind of couldn't imagine how a mother would not grudge losing her children. Blessed, after Pádraig H. Pearse. I grudge them more than any of you will ever know, my 2 strong sons and their stupid, bloody protest. I have cried all day and all night, every day and every night since then, ever and forever. No amen on my tongue. For Pat, our melancholic prophet, fainting at a drop of blood, but calling out for insurrection over an old warrior's grave. He set off that morning, his pawn shop sword threatening to catch the spokes and throw him off his bike. And Will, my baby boy, his big brother's shadow, took the tram to town to throw away his life too. You must not grieve. You too will be blessed. Pat wrote to me that terrible day. Blessed? Ha, I tend the graves. I feel the burn of lime on my boy's flesh. To excuse the coughs, it's the bit of hay fever on the fine day. Now, the next one I'm going to read is about my father. And this was written about the last journey that he made from hospital back to Kilmore. Ambulance. I never thought it would come to this. You in a hospital bed, fast asleep on a bedpan, your penance for calling the nurse too many times. And us ducking and diving, hiding in shadows to watch while you slept, wiping your face while you wept. We smuggled in sweet contraband to spoon feed our darling man. Dishes of semolina, creamy and sweet, stewed apples with magical properties. And that last journey homewards in November, a rough ride on the car ferry to Ballyhack, the painful climb to Arthurstown, your stretcher bed rattling along the new line from the mountain of Forth to the old barony of Bargy, past the crosses in the Skeoch, the cemetery gates with their fresh white paint, down the road to Ballask, and the welcome crackle of tyres on your neat gravelled yard. You saw none of this, only the insides of your eyelids, the ambulance ceiling, and my brother's gentle face. They wheeled your stretcher in, shut the front door behind you. After my father died, it happens in all houses, his clothes and things had to be tidied up, and he had bought a new coat a couple of years before, and it was a bit like Cinderella fitting the slipper. Some of the men tried it on. This is about his coat. Fitting. And who will wear our father's coat? Navy blue and lined with gingham. It was a bargain in Wallace's at the time. We agree he always had a sense of style. The fitting starts with the eldest son. Body too loose, sleeves too tight. He hands it to the brother, the bigger build. The sleeves too short for him, it refuses to close on his chest. 3 grandsons take a turn. Young shoulders stretch the coat. Son-in-law next, someone says. I bring it home. My husband suspects it won't go anywhere near him. It hangs for a day or two on the banisters. Then I put it on. Like a second skin, snug as anything, I roll the sleeves back to make stylish cuffs. I wear it all that day. By evening, my body heat has revived his smell. I breathe in his sweat one last time, pluck a few white hairs from the collar, then bundle it into the wash with some socks for company. Comes out like new. I take it everywhere with me now. Don't tell me there is something strange about a woman in her prime wearing her father's coat. It keeps the wind at bay. It's perfect for country walks or shopping. Deep pockets make a handbag redundant, and it carries sweets when I wheel a grandchild in the park. Last week, I brought it to the Opera House and held it on my knee while Eddie Reader sang, and I wept for something. How am I doing for time, Dominic? Am I okay?
You're fine so far.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay. I have 2 more. Oh, the next one's about a coat as well. It's about my long green coat. Anybody that has children of the teenage variety or even a bit older, most people know what it's like when they go out at night. And well, before there was a pandemic, and maybe we're getting into that again, they go out at night and they don't come home. And what do? You get up in the night and you put your coat on and you go look for them. Mac, this is a villanelle that I wrote. Mac. The night she went out and didn't come back, Fridays and Saturdays downtown, disco nights, I'd wake in the dark hours, put on my Mac. The long green one, she said, looked like a sack and would give the dogs in the street a fright, which never bothered me. But if she didn't come back from the edge of disaster, that hungry black abyss that lay in wait for our daughter might have eaten her up. So I got out of bed and put on my Mac over my nightdress and slipped out the back, drove around the town in the middle of the night because I'd have died if she hadn't come back. Little girls staggered past, addled and racked by vodka and shots, boys coked up, ready for a fight as I waited in the car, guardian angel in a Mac, to drive her and her friends to Burger Mac or Abracababra, whatever it took to finish the night. That was what I did, and that's how I got her back, driving round in my nightdress and the long green Mac. And I'm going to finish with, back to the very beginning, a memory from when I was a child. Cowhouse. In the beginning, they had one cow. a tough little heifer that could kick like a mule. She says she used to park my pram at the cowhouse door while he taught her how to strip the milk from the teats until it squirted, rattling a tune on the sides of the bucket. As the herd grew to an assembly of docile, big-boned Frisians, temperamental roan and a grey cow that was almost blue, I was deployed to the kitchen to supervise the others who had arrived stealthily, unbidden, to yoke my young shoulders. Once I left my post and slipped outside to stand covert at the cowhouse door, just close enough to smell the warmth of beasts and dung and watch them go about their work in the sanctuary of one frugal, low-watt light bulb. My mother's voice was girlish, regaling family news and gossip, and he sang for her, "My feet are here on Broadway." And when they laughed together like I had never heard before, my little heart was pierced with a yearning that can still ambush and desolate. And thank you for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to read. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anne. It's a great start to the event. I'd now like to introduce Michael Churek. Michael is from Bird Hill, County Tipperary originally, and he's been a teacher for 36 years. He's had many poems published in many journals, including Poetry Ireland Review and the Blue Nib Stony Thursday book. He's published 3 books with the Limerick Writers Centre and Revival Press. Saved to Memory, Lost to View was his memoir in verse and prose in 2016. And since then, we've published Where It Began and his latest collection, Flipsides. So I'll hand over to Michael to start his reading.
Thanks, Dominic. It's great to reconnect with the Mountshannon Arts Festival. I was there a few times in the live version, so this is the next best thing. I've lived on the Tip-Clare border for most of my life in Ballina-Killaloe, and I have a number of friends whose fathers came to live in this area by virtue of their work as bargemen with the inland navigation. So this poem celebrates that aspect of the heritage of the twin towns. And the poem begins on Kavanagh Seat near Bagot Street Bridge in Dublin and ends on the boardwalk in modern Killaloe. Barges. The poet from his seat near Bagot Street Bridge observed a barge bringing mythologies. Managers of the Grand Canal Company oversaw boats and boatmen ferrying cargoes of asbestos from Athy, sugar beet for Carlow, firkins of porter from St. James's Gate to Limerick and other far-flung towns. Deckers, engine men and greasers, with quick wits and jazzy nicknames, Gorky Man Anderson and Bishop Whelan, Lam Conlon and Tom the Guy, B&I John Dunn and Joni Judge, Cape Town Maher and Lucky Roach, Bogeyman Kelly and Banagher Jack, grew acquainted with long days and short pay, absences from family, bugs, blow lamps, hot bulb engines, backfire, black smoke, perils of flywheels, stop ropes, lake swells, and hauntings at Lanesborough and the 13th Loch. Children on Killaloe's trendy boardwalk turn towards the Pierhead and Loch Derg, and look, barges are chugging downstream from Kildare and Inchicore, crewed by forefathers bearing their names: Conroy, Kennedy, Nolan, O'Donoghue, Lawler, Bowers. And before moving to Ballina-Killaloe, I grew up in a small rural area in North Tipperary near Bird Hill, and I was subjected in my childhood to numerous rituals, including many religious ones, like the nightly saying of the Rosary. So this poem recalls that, And it also recalls a time in the early 1960s when the great train robbery was making headlines in the news, radio news. So the poem is called The Rosary and the Great Train Robbery, and I'm dedicating it to my cousins up in Kildare, one of whom is here tonight. After supper, we pulled back the chairs and knelt for the rosary, lapping the 5 slow decades like runners in a long-distance race, taking turns at the pacemaking, using our beads to count the Our Fathers, Hail Marys, and Glorias. The beadless used their fingers. After the final soporific, as it was in the beginning, is now and ever shall be, we bunched together for the Hail Holy Queen, a rabble of human misery. Poor banished children of Eve, mourning and weeping in this valley of tears. And then the last long sprint through the litany of the Blessed Virgin. Here was poetry, mirror of justice, vessel of honor, seat of wisdom, mystical rose, Tower of David, Tower of Ivory, Ark of the Covenant. But it was somber stuff. We envied the irreverence of the restless declaimer of the Litany of the Saints, who, having had his fill of angels and archangels, patriarchs and prophets, called time after Fabian and Sebastian, John and Paul, and blurted out, Cosmas and Damien and all them other fellas. In the home of our cousins in North Kildare, we observed the same rituals of rosary, litany, and add-ons, save for one night in 1963, the adults away, and Carmel filling the mother's leading role. We were faithful right through to the third sorrowful mystery, when Oliver's beads spilled onto the floor, mutated into the model of a mail train stalled in Buckinghamshire. The rosary hijacked. Mary, St. Peter, and all them other lads bundled into the HVP carriage. The driver coshed, the mail bags commandeered. Reynolds and Wisby, spare us. Goody and White, go easy on us. Hussey and James, don't harm us. Edwards and Biggs, have mercy on us. And I'm moving back to East Clare for my third poem. It's a more recent one. There's an old saying, going to a wedding is the makings of another. And I am, I suppose, living testament to the truth, or at least the possibilities of that adage, because I met my wife at a country wedding. It was, as Don McLean would say, a long, long time ago, but I can still remember. Kiss. Between Slieve-Berna and Lochderg, we shared our first kiss, October. The wee small hours, back seat, motoring from Ballybally towards Toongraney, stragglers from a country wedding. The driver, I remember him well, but not the make and model of the car. It was blue, automatic shift. It broke down. But that is of no importance. What matters is that somewhere in the dark, in Ballycuggaran or Ballyloughnan, in Rahina Moor, Rahina Beg or Cahir, in Ballyhurley, Ballyheafy or Bale-Kelly, your lips touched mine for the first time. The townlands, undistinguished and untraced. We might have been voyagers lost in space. But now those ancient tracts of land I bless, because somewhere on the road between the tribal Ballys and Raheens, our mouths connected in a loving kiss. Speaking of Don McLean, he features in 2 poems from my recent collection, Flipsides. For a brief time in a previous life, I adopted his greatest hit as my party piece. And I thought it was an inspired choice because everybody, without exception, knew that song. And then one night at a staff social, I discovered the exception to the everybody. This poem is called American Boy. pressed to do my party piece at the staff Christmas social. After the mandatory protests and demurrals, touch of a cold frog in the throat, out of practice, haven't sung in yonks, I sidle up to the microphone, sling the guitar strap about my shoulder, and strike a swaggering Don McLean pose, while the genial master of ceremonies solicits the title of my chosen song. A long, long time ago, but I can still remember how Martin's intro made me smile. Achorja, Michael Durack is going to give us The American Boy. Oh, that's a new one. I mentioned Patrick Kavanagh in the first poem, and about 20 years ago, the Kavanagh Society up in Inniskeen floated the idea of a national commemoration of the great Monaghan poet. And the idea was that groups throughout the country would select a waterside location and stage a reading of Kavanagh poems. And at the time, I was a member of the Killaloe Writers Group, so we had no problem finding a waterside location, whether by lake or river or canal or a combination of those. So we went ahead and arranged a reading. And around that time, the late great comedian and entertainer Brendan Grace had come to live in Killaloe. So we invited him to join us and maybe give a rendition of on Raglan Road. And he agreed. So this poem recalls the occasion. It's called Acapulco. Called upon to commemorate the poet Kavanagh by water, canal water preferably, we selected our favorite poems of wonder and redemption and roped in Brendan Grace to sing on Raglan Road with the backing of a fiddle or a guitar perhaps. Thanks, but no thanks. I'll do it Acapulco. And so it transpired that on a summer evening, leafy autumnal Dublin 4 up sticks to Killaloe, and there by Shannon water and canal water, call it a cappella or call it Acapulco, the funny man with the golden voice sang of grief as a fallen leaf at the dawning of the day. Doing okay for time, Dominic? Am I?
Yeah, you've time for a couple more. Yeah.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. The next one is when television came to Ireland with the setting up of RT or television, most rural households didn't have their own TV set. So I had the experience of going out to visit the homes of more affluent neighbours to catch my favourite programmes, and that meant having to confront my childhood fear of darkness, a patch of darkness. 40 paces, give or take, from our front door to Maroney's black and white TV. The first 10 bathed in kitchen window light. The final 20 lit by a public lamp above a crossroads public water pump. A patch of utter darkness in between. They say that darkness is mere absence of light, a gravelled path the same morning as night. But tell that to the bandits and assassins, to the sly beasts lurking in the bushes. Tell it to the boy, hot-footing, heart in mouth, to catch the fugitive or arrest and trial. I'll finish with a few short recent poems. Most of the poems I've read are from Flipsides. I was working on a poem recently set in Moscow, in which I was including a reference to the grave of the composer Prokofiev. And while I was doing a bit of research on Prokofiev's life, I stumbled on a remarkable coincidence. And that gave rise to another new poem called Angel of Death. Moscow, 1953, the 5th of March. The Angel of Death paid 2 house calls, the names of Stalin and Prokofiev in his book. In the House of Unions, the agent of the Great Terror reposed. The morning begot such mass, such urgency. The angels swooped and reaped 100 more. Amid the chaos, the maker of music was manhauled through back streets against the human tide. At his funeral, there were 30 souls, one for each piano, violin, and cello concerto, his every ballet, opera, symphony. And I'll finish up with a COVID poem. For the last 15 months or so, I've been writing quite a few poems about the pandemic and the various lockdowns, some serious and some not so serious. So this is just one sample. And one morning I was listening to all the grim stuff from talk radio, and I switched over to Classic FM, and I caught the pleasant tones of Johann Sebastian Bach's Sheep May Safely Graze, and that prompted the following poem, which is called Unsafely Grazed. Sheep may safely graze, nibble on moors, freely roam, while we do click and collect, resort to takeaways, eat at home. Cattle may safely graze and sup, contentedly ruminate, while we stare at empty pubs, curse lockdowns, stagnate. Giraffes may safely graze on high leaves, craning their necks above us, sanitized, mask-wearing, socially distanced, nervous wrecks. Once we were proud, we walked tall. Now, half stoic, half crazed, supplicants who creep and crawl, our scabby knees unsafely grazed. Thank you very much.
Hey, Michael, great. I love the musical references in your poetry. We'll move on to our third reader, Frances Browner, from Greystones in County Wicklow. And Revival Press published her first collection there over 12 months ago now, I think, in 2019, called Roots and Wings. And as I said, she had some tremendous connections with Limerick through her family. So I'll hand over to Frances.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Dominic. And thank you, Roisin, for inviting me. I'm going to start actually with the title poem, Roots and Wings, which I read 2 years ago in Mountshannon at the Bard on the Barge Festival. And the theme that year was Roots and Wings. And then Dominic chose it for my title. So I feel I've come the full circle. And this is a villanelle. My parents gave me roots and wings, allowing me to fly away with the security that freedom brings. They gave me many other things, along with welcomes home to stay. My parents gave me roots and wings for a life of roundabouts and swings, a chain of coming home, going astray, with the security that freedom brings. I was never tied to apron strings. No one tried to make me stay. Instead, they gave me roots and wings. When the time came to end the flings, home for good I returned one day, with the security that freedom brings. And I'm glad I got the chance to say, thanks for letting me go my own way. Thanks for giving me roots and wings, with the security that freedom brings. And my mother was from Offaly and my father from Limerick. And what they had in common among many other things was the River Shannon. So this poem is called Shonna's River. Flows 224 miles, the longest in the British Isles. From Cavan's cross-county mountain cap, it weaves its way into Limerick's lap, draining a fifth of this fair nation, dividing west from east and south, before tipping it into the Atlantic Ocean, coursing 11 counties on its route. Offaly, birthplace of my mother Sal. Her father and grandfather were lock keepers, where river meets the Grand Canal. Midpoint Banagher, Trollope was postmaster. Charlotte Bronte honeymooned here, picnicked on the water, where all owned a boat, she wrote, or hired or borrowed. Ma met Da at Shannonbridge Carnival. Within a year, wedding bells followed. At its mouth, Da had learned to swim. His brother Mike caught slippery eels. Their grandfather founded a boat club, captained the first Shannon rugby team. There is an Isle, their Limerick parish anthem. This river is the seat of my ancestral hearth. Forefathers ran regattas on its Curragar foam, called after Shona, Celtic goddess of myth, where ashes will scatter when they all row home. So then 8 children later, this is what our household kind of looked like. And it's called Careful. A tower of burnt toast on the table, melted butter dribbling our chins, porridge glued to the sauce pot, jellied, tea to trot a mouse on, imagine. Clothes drying on the radiator, whiffs of sunlight, aerial surf, Ma making lunches, 2 cuts of bread and a banana mashed black, strawberry jam for buzzing bees in the schoolyard. Baby shuffles the floor on his bum, Da snaps his newspaper shut, and we file out one by one, indifferent, 7 of us into the Volkswagen, into marriages, immigration, careful families of our own. So then we moved to Dublin when I was 7, into a newly built estate, so there weren't many children my age. I think the next girl to me was 3 years younger. So instead I built a little imaginary world and I called it my secret place. I used to run up and down the avenue from our house to the shops and back. I can't keep up with her, my friend Gail complained. Ma just laughed. I used to run up and down the kitchen floor from the hall to the back door, clapping my hands. Everyone else watching television, ignoring me. I used to jump up and down at the sink when I was supposed to be washing the dishes or drying, my hands on the draining board for an extra spring. No wonder she's thin, Auntie Peg used to scold the cousins when they protested I wouldn't play, that all I did was run up and down all day. But I was in another world, winning Eurovision, the tennis at Wimbledon, Miss Universe, Miss World, the Rose of Tralee, whatever was on the TV. I was Twiggy, Mary Quant, Scylla, Sandy Shaw, Lulu married to the Bee Gees, married to the Monkeys, on top of the Pops, the front page of Jackie. I was Enid Blyton, Lorna Doone, the Bobbsey twins and Anne of Green Gables, the famous 5, my own secret 7. I was in Bunty, Judy and the 4 Marys. Sometimes now, when I see a niece or a nephew burst into a run, clap hands and glaze their eyes over, I wonder if an ancestor was locked up long ago for such carry-on. So then I became a teenager, as we all did, and this is called Tables Turned. All the girls in my class have a record player. 14-year-old me used to wail. If everyone jumped in the Liffey, would you want to jump in as well? Dad smiled when he saw me gasp at the shiny brand new turntable. Cream lid, handle like a suitcase, Phillips, high fidelity, transportable. I lugged it from Busaurus down the country so my cousins and I could learn to jive. Quick step around the kitchen floorboards. Suddenly you love me, or only 45. Jesus, but you're a swinger. A lad all the girls wanted to dance with was surprised. Did you take them lessons up in Dublin? I taught myself, I timidly replied. LPs too turned on that table. Abbey Road, Sgt. Pepper, Ziggy Stardust, Fleetwood Mac, until I bought myself a cassette deck and Carly Simon's No Secrets tape cassette. All tossed into a skip the day Dad's house was emptied and I wasn't there to supervise. Now the beechwood stand is used to store encyclopedia that did manage to survive, and nephews pay a small fortune for vinyl from 75. But then I flapped my wings and went to Paris as an au pair girl and found little notebooks since that I used to scribble out words of poems in French, surprised myself. And then in 2015, after the bombings of Paris, all these memories came back. Paris la plus belle. Familiar streets flashed the screen, landmarks from my past. A young au pair pushing a pram through Jardin de Tuileries, Les Invalides, by La Tour d'Eiffel and Notre Dame. Alone at night on Rue de Pont, safe in my chambre de bonne, dreaming of l'amour with Patrice Lemaitre, the music of Maxime Le Forestier. The following words lament the loss of that love. 40 years later, I apply them to Paris. Il est l'aube, la jour va commencer, après une nuit longue pleine de nuages. Je vais voir encore, le soleil se lève, et il y aura de la lumière après cette nuit noire pleine de douleur. It is done. The day is about to begin after a long night full of clouds. I am going to see the sun rising again. There will be light after this dark night full of sorrow. So again, back in the day, I went on a lot of holidays to Greece. I think 5 years in a row, we went island hopping, as they called it. And then recently, of course, again, we saw photographs of different visitors coming there. So this inspired Paradise Lost. Kos, 1976. Sun so hot it sears my skin. The sand stings the soles of my feet. Hip-hopping along the copper beach. Waters warm, cerulean sapphire, and the shimmering Aegean I float. In fascination of a ribbon road, winding up a faraway hill, through celestial rocks and trees, until it stops in a knot of blue, white stucco houses at the top. On the narrow cobblestone streets of this village, I will carnival come the charcoal night. Kos, 2016. Voices cry in the wilderness, bodies drift and limbs trash, ribs like twigs shiver. Slowing to a whimper, faces fraught, eyes horrified, they wade through wine-dark water to hug the metallic shore. Hearts breaking, souls aching, forced to flee their core. There's no song or dance, no heavens above, no fiesta, no talk of love. Then in 1987, I went to New York for the summer and I stayed 20 years. So a friend of mine's son said lately when I went for the weekend, "Mammy, do you think she'll stay long?" So I assure you from now on, I'll go home when I'm supposed to. So this is called Manhattan, and this is a pantomime. I climbed up from the subway, arched my back to see the sky. Tall buildings seemed to sway, stone trees in a concrete pile. Arched my back to see the sky as a stream of traffic rippled by, stone trees in a concrete pile, soaring towards the sun's fire. As a stream of traffic rippled by, tall buildings seemed to sway, soaring towards the sun's fire. I climbed up from the subway. So now I'm back in Greystones, 14 years, the longest I've ever lived anywhere in my whole life, would you believe? And last year I curated the poem Poet's Wall in Greystones, which was inspired by Dominic's Limerick Wall. And for that I wrote this poem, Home at Last. I was first tempted to try an alcoholic drink in the beach house down at the harbour. Vodka, blackcurrant and white lemonade. It was the summer of '71 regatta. My brother Jerry moved here in '89. We thought he was settling in the sticks. No dart, no N11, only a hungry monk, 3 coffee shops, 2 pubs, and some chips. In Montauk, I met up with the brothers Ryan, Pauls Caffrey, Donnelly, Adi and Roisin. On a jetty overlooking Long Island Sound, they spoke of their magical hometown. Apartments are being built in Charlesland, my sister-in-law said to me. So I shrugged, disinterested, while I logged onto daft.ie, and thus began my homeward journey. So I'll finish now with another old poem I found recently, and I actually started it in that Bards on a Bard workshop with Angela Carr, and it's called The Wild Geese. We all used to gather in the Wild Geese, our home away from home. Had we grown wings and flown, or were some of us forced to take flight? Many were rooted to the bar, on the same seat every night, looking out onto Broadway. There were no theatres here, no neon lights, only a wide road and a park on the opposite side, red bricked apartment blocks to the left and right. We were a family of sorts, our homeland binding us together, the laughter, the crack, the banter. There was despair too in some eyes, but little spoken of, unless at 4 o'clock in the morning, when the bar was quiet, with only 1 or 2 left. That's when the stories came pouring, when loneliness set in, and relationships were slung together with hope. We got married young, an older Irish lady told me, because we wanted to make a home. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Very much, Frances. That was great.
Thank you.
Now we come to our last but not least poet, local writer and poet Kieran Beville. Kieran has just been back in Limerick a short few years, but he's certainly been keeping me busy because we've published 5 titles from him so far. 3 of them were poetry collections, and his latest one, The Voices from the Void, is just released but not launched yet. Hopefully we'll get a live launch out of that pretty soon anyway. Also, Kieran is going to be teaching our creative writing course, our 6-week creative writing course in September. If anybody's interested in that, details will be on Facebook shortly anyway. So I'll hand over to Kieran to get on with the reading.
Thanks, Dominic, and I've enjoyed the readings so far, and great to be in such company. This is a poem called Family Tree, and it's based on a childhood memory, my maternal grandmother's funeral in St. Mary's Cathedral in Limerick. When they buried my mother's mother, it rained as we stood near the open grave. I was afraid I might fall in, and that my name would appear beneath the white marble cross of the family plot near the cathedral door. They lowered her into the dark unknown, and it seemed to me that they were wrong about this being the way to enter heaven. Shoveled earth pounded like my heart on the polished pine and gilded crucifix, keeping rhythm with the Shannon's sobs of my shadowy aunts, whom I still see in silhouette, like winter trees against the solemn sky. And I wondered if she would grow into a wrinkled tree, with branches like her bony arms, making music with the wind, as she did when she played the melodeon, with silver leaves like her hair, where birds might rest or nest, and sing the familiar melodies. Yes, she was a tree, and shed seeds that made a forest of herself, roots spreading deep and wide, gripping the sacred soil, now cradling the bones of her children. This next poem is Carnival Night, and I think it just speaks for itself. It's a memory of a particular place, a particular time, a long time ago now, Carnival Night. We strolled through rows of stalls, lit with coloured bulbs, your heart as light as candy floss, in that seaside town, where we played pitch and toss, dizzy from swing boats, chairplane and carousel, where you straddled a unicorn and giggled like a girl. In the thrill of the dodgems, you held me tight. Bursts of sparks like shooting stars fell in that nighttime fair, metallic smell and the coconut scent of your henna hair, laden with laughter and prizes, as pellets pinged from the crooked barrel of a rifle, which we gave to a mother with twins. We shared chips, sun-wrapped in a page 3 scandal on the pier. Boats moored to a voyeuristic moon bobbed, vinegar blending with the salty air, diesel in iridescent pools, creosote ropes and a hint of fish near lobster baskets. You sat on a bollard, the wraparound skirt that I bought for you in Camden Market, peacock pattern splaying in the wind, rhythm of water lapping that evening, boats with tire walls softly heaving. This next poem is called Blue Hydrangeas. He found her by the blue hydrangeas in the shadow of time-chiseled hills, where cairns of memories guide through veiled paths. That was beneath the paths where she nursed her kids, under slate quarried from those fells. Streams gushing like laughter slowed into the river of many years, like a silk ribbon curving in a gentle wind. He placed blue hydrangeas beside her name in stone, as dark clouds draped the torrents like a mourning veil, where he picnicked with her before their limbs grew sore. Then he went home alone. This is one I posted on Facebook today and got a little bit of a reaction. It's called Cooking with Nigella in Lockdown. Like Michael's pandemic poems, this is a bit more frivolous, I think, but nevertheless, a contemplation that emerged from being locked up too long. Cooking with Nigella in Lockdown. Today I cooked with Nigella Lawson, elegant and dizzyingly eclectic in the kitchen. Simple thin base pizza. It was truly awesome. We chopped tomato, onion, halloumi, made dough in a bowl, fingers mingling as we talked, kneading and rolling it into discs like romantic full moons, hearts melding, saltiness of the cheese, sweetness of the tomato complementing each other. She spoke of her Egyptian friend who introduced her to the scorched flavor of za'atar and the joy of dry herbs, adding coriander pinch by pinch. It grew jalapeno hot and spicy, snuggled under a blanket of fresh mint. Words tumbled from her ample, Oxford-educated lips, opulent yet earthy. She drizzled virginal oil, eyes like ripe black olives, I salivating to her seductive smile. We cut the pizzas into spindly wedges. A saxophone played to rolling credits as we drank burgundy and ate, and I arranged the second day. This is called Masquerade Ball, and last night I dreamt I went to a masked ball where chiffon and satin dresses swept the grand Venetian hall. A quartet played as we assembled to the romance of their ensemble. I fancied you were there, though I could not be sure, I hoped. The ghosts of glory gathered, mind hugs from afar and fond kisses from their fingertips. Though the music played, nobody danced. Cocktails were served by a lady's hand in velvet gloves, sipped through lipstick smiles, and we longed for love, to embrace and kiss each other face to face. Then I awoke, yearning for such bliss. This next poem is called Hotel Breakfast. I'm sure we all know the experience of arriving at the buffet in the hotel, and maybe this will jog some memories. Freshly showered and wide awake, I stride down the carpeted corridor to the dining room. Tables draped in laundered linen, under fluorescent light gleams bright. Folded napkins in brass rings seem like crowns for kings. A queue of sleepy men at the buffet pile fried fare onto their plates. Women seem more prepared for the day, faces made up and nicely dressed. I opt for the continental breakfast. There are bread rolls, croissants, berries, grapes. I take cranberry juice from a crystal jug, coffee from a silver pot. Natural yogurt poured over tinned apricots, and I remember snow fallen on the Alps. A waitress in an Eastern European accent asks for my room number. I have to check the key. Chained to a little log in my trousers pocket, when I put it there, it crossed my mind that the bulge might be misconstrued. A couple seated near the window, overlooking the sea, touch hands and look at each other lovingly. I remember you and I feel alone suddenly, like the man in the corner without name, reading a newspaper, not making eye contact with anybody, lest he feel the same. And this poem now is called Last Supper. I awoke. My daughter lives in Pisa at the moment, but one time she lived in Napoli. She's lived in various places in Italy, and so I visited those places from time to time. And this one is kind of based in Naples. I awoke in Napoli, squinting in the intruding sun, shapes indistinct but color clear, like an impressionistic scene from Renoir. A print of a two-tone iris, blue and yellow, hung on the wall. I shaved and noticed crow's feet and furrowed brow, lifelines of laughter and sorrow. Light sharpens shadows. Later we walked on the promenade, in a haze of sun and salted air, awed by the glory of the Bay of Naples, imagining what it would be like to live there, beside the sapphire, sparkling sea, to be a blur in a watercolor scene. It was time for aperitivo and spritz, mine the bitterness of Campari, hers the sweetness of Aperol. There on that terrace, a wrought iron fence entwined with white clematis and red roses, gently fanned by a warm breeze, as the sky quilted with clouds. Spaghetti carbonara was our last supper, before betrayal caused us to suffer, and all the years dissolved in tears, but there were bowls of laughter too. Petals wilted on the clematis, and the thorn-crowned head bled, and Jesus wept for us. And this, I make this the second last point. This is called Classroom Exercise. A shaft of light thrust from behind a black cloud through the classroom window like an angelic sword, and a galaxy of chalk dust particles danced in its blade. Swirling atoms colliding like a new world forming, I imagined one of them splitting, protons and electrons spinning, and the school being vaporized in a mushroom cloud, like the one the master spoke about before he banged his duster on the board. Our necks had turned like sunflowers to the golden window towards the fields where we longed to play. But the stern clock said, as the hours wilted away, our heads drooped to parched copybooks that soaked ink in essays about what I want to be when I grow up, nibs scratching. Every one of us had to read aloud the desired professions, humble trades, careers, and the wild ambitions. Pete wanted to be a priest, but a speeding chariot took him to heaven like Elijah, his mother said. We thought of Ben-Hur and Charlton Heston, but later learned the driver was a drunk from Balnacarra West. Tony wanted to be a soldier like his dad and to die for Ireland like Padraig Pearse. We envied Cyril the stevedore, who looked down on all but the astronauts, for whom the sky was not the limit. We laughed when Liam chose librarian, as he never read a book. There was a docker and a doctor, a tabernacle of bakers, a babel of barbers, a flood of plumbers, a sample of salesmen. From among that class of scholars, a trip of hippies emerged. And I wondered how many of us became what we wrote about that day. So finally, this poem, my sister Margaret, who was 57 years old, died last in January the 15th, 2020, just a little over a year ago. And she had Down syndrome, and she was also autistic. But I remember a time when she was younger, she used to sing on the garden swing. And so I wrote this poem on the occasion of her death, and it's called Broken Wings. And it's from my late sister Margaret. When you crashed to earth with broken wings, a frantic mother watched her fledgling fall, and we heard her cries. Your frightened eyes and silent tongue told us you belonged to the skies, and we knew the day would come to say goodbye, but you lingered long. Was it God who clipped your wings, or did you, like Icarus, fly too close to the sun? There was music in your soul once, before you ceased to sing. When the burden of blessing grew heavy as a cross, we found refuge in a Savior who bore the curse. Now your injured wings are healed, and you have flown, drifted on the ether into song, free at last in the altitude of the heavens, to glide and soar upon the updrafts, winds, and thermal currents, to defy the gravity of this mortal coil, rising in a spiraling climb above our earthly soil. Thank you.
Kieran, thank you very much for that. That's great. This kind of brings an end to our bank holiday poetry interlude. I'd like to thank our readers, Anne, Francis, Michael, and Kieran, of course, and thank Roisin from the Mountshannon Arts Festival for inviting us to read. Before we go, I'd just like to ask anybody there who wants to say something or anything to the poets, they're quite welcome to do so. If anybody wants to unmute and say a few words, they can. If not, we'll bring it to an end. We all okay? Yeah, okay, so look, thanks again for joining in. We've had, I think it was 23 people total tuned in, so it was great. Thanks very much for that. And again, thanks to Roisin, thanks to all of you as well. And hopefully we'll see you all in a live venue in the not too distant future. So I'm going to bring the meeting to an end. Okay, thank you. Take care. Good night.
Thank you, Dominic.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Francis.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Joan for coming. Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Maura.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye,
everybody.
Francis. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.